Officer Greg Turner was the type of cop who thought he was untouchable. A veteran on the force, he had spent decades patrolling the streets of his small town, enforcing his own skewed sense of law and order. To him, minorities were always suspects, their very presence a justification for harassment. He believed his badge made him untouchable, and his record, littered with complaints of racial profiling and excessive force, had never faced serious scrutiny. It was late one evening when Turner, patrolling his usual route, spotted a sleek rental car parked outside a small diner. The car stood out in this quiet part of town, where most residents drove older vehicles. Suspicion flickered in Turner's mind as he slowed his cruiser to a crawl. Peering through the windshield, he saw a man step out of the car. Black, athletic build, wearing a hoodie. Doesn't belong here, Turner thought. What Turner didn't realize was that the man he was watching was Floyd Mayweather, the undefeated boxing champion. Floyd had just finished a charity event in a nearby city and decided to stop for a quick meal before heading back to his hotel. He wanted to keep things low-key, dress casually, without the entourage or fanfare that usually followed him. Turner parked his cruiser and stepped out, his hand already hovering near his baton. He approached Floyd quickly, his boots crunching against the gravel. "Hey, what are you doing here?" Turner barked, his voice sharp with authority. Floyd paused, confused by the aggressive tone. He turned calmly, his expression neutral. "Just grabbing something to eat," he replied, his voice level. Turner wasn't satisfied. He glanced at the rental car, then back at Floyd. "That your car?" he demanded. "Yes, it's a rental," Floyd said, keeping his tone polite. "Is there a problem?" Turner's eyes narrowed. He didn't like the way Floyd was so calm, so composed. In his mind, this was a challenge to his authority. "You got ID?" Turner snapped. Floyd nodded, reaching into his pocket to retrieve his wallet. But Turner's suspicion only grew. Before Floyd could hand over his ID, Turner cut him off. "You know what? You match the description of someone we're looking for," he said, his voice laced with accusation. "A stolen car, huh? That why you're driving this fancy thing?" Floyd blinked, caught off guard by the sudden escalation. "No," he said firmly. "This car is rented in my name. You're welcome to check it." But Turner wasn't interested in checking facts. To him, Floyd's calm demeanor only confirmed his bias. He stepped closer, his hand now gripping his baton. "I don't need you telling me how to do my job," Turner snarled. "Step away from the car." Floyd sighed softly, stepping back as instructed. He had faced situations like this before and knew better than to escalate. "Look, officer," he began, trying to de-escalate. "I'm just passing through town. There's no need for—" "Shut it," Turner barked, cutting him off. "You people think you can do whatever you want." Floyd's jaw tightened, but he kept his cool. "You're making a mistake," he said evenly. That simple statement seemed to ignite something in Turner. Without warning, he pulled out his baton and swung it hard against Floyd's side. The impact was sharp and loud, the force knocking Floyd a step back. Turner's voice rose, his words dripping with anger. "You people never learn, do you?" Floyd stumbled, clutching his side, but he didn't retaliate. His instincts as a fighter told him to defend himself, but his years of experience with prejudice told him restraint was the only option. Straightening slowly, he met Turner's glare with a calm, piercing gaze. "You're making a mistake," he repeated, his voice low and firm. Turner froze for a moment, unnerved by Floyd's lack of fear. Something about the way he stood, the quiet confidence in his words, sent a ripple of doubt through the officer's mind. But he quickly pushed it aside, convincing himself that this was just another thug trying to talk big. "You're under arrest," Turner snapped, grabbing for his cuffs. Floyd didn't resist as Turner roughly twisted his arms behind his back and locked the cuffs in place. Nearby, a waitress peered nervously through the diner's window, her hand hovering over her phone as she debated whether to call someone. As Turner shoved Floyd toward the back of his cruiser, he couldn't shake the unease creeping into his chest. There was something different about this man, something he couldn't quite place. But Turner was too blinded by his own arrogance to see the storm he had just unleashed. Officer Turner shoved Floyd Mayweather into the back seat of his cruiser with an air of triumph. He didn't care that Floyd had calmly offered his ID, or that nothing about his demeanor suggested criminal behavior. To Turner, this was just another opportunity to assert his dominance. Pulling up to the station, Turner yanked Floyd out of the car and led him through the back entrance. The younger officers on duty glanced over, some raising eyebrows at the sight of Floyd, who remained composed despite the situation. Turner didn't notice. He was too busy relishing the moment. "Sit down," Turner barked, shoving Floyd into a holding room. Floyd sat quietly, his eyes scanning the space before locking onto Turner's. That steady gaze was unsettling, but Turner masked his discomfort by snapping, "Don't look at me like that. You think you're smarter than me, huh?" Floyd said nothing. He simply folded his hands in his lap and waited, determined to find evidence that would justify his actions. Turner returned to Floyd's rental car. Rummaging through the trunk, he found a gym bag filled with workout clothes, boxing gloves, and a set of hand wraps. Turner frowned, tossing the gloves aside like they were trash. "What, you think you're some kind of athlete?" he muttered under his breath. The discovery did nothing to change his mind. To Turner, Floyd was just another smooth-talking suspect trying to weasel his way out of trouble. He returned to the station, throwing the bag onto his desk with a scoff. Meanwhile, Officer Daniels, one of the younger officers at the station, had been watching the situation unfold. Daniels was fresh on the force and still idealistic, unlike Turner, whose years of unchecked power had warped his sense of duty. Something about the way Floyd carried himself struck Daniels as unusual. Floyd wasn't acting like someone who was guilty, or even scared. His calm, composed demeanor seemed more like a man used to being in control, someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Daniels couldn't shake the feeling that he recognized Floyd from somewhere. Curious, Daniels discreetly pulled out his phone and typed Floyd Mayweather into a search bar. His jaw dropped as images and articles filled the screen. There he was, undefeated boxing champion, global icon, and philanthropist. Daniels scanned the articles, including a recent one about Floyd's charity tour, where he was visiting underserved communities to inspire young people. Daniels glanced back toward the holding room, his heart racing. That's him, he thought. He was sure of it. While Daniels was making his discovery, Turner was busy taunting Floyd in the holding room. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, smirking down at his quiet detainee. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue?" Turner sneered. "You thought you could walk into my town, break the rules, and get away with it? Guess again. I've been putting troublemakers like you in their place my whole career." Floyd met Turner's gaze, his expression unchanging. "You're wrong about me," he said evenly. Turner laughed, shaking his head. "You think you're special, don't you? Guess what? You're not. You're just another punk who thinks he's smarter than the law." Floyd didn't reply. He leaned back in his chair, his silence speaking louder than words. Turner shifted uncomfortably, but quickly masked it with another laugh. Daniels, now certain of Floyd's identity, approached Turner cautiously. Sir, can I talk to you for a second?" he asked. Turner turned, clearly annoyed. "What is it, Daniels?" Daniels lowered his voice, glancing toward the holding room. "I think you've got the wrong guy." Turner frowned. "What are you talking about?" Daniels hesitated but pushed forward. "That man in there. I think he's Floyd Mayweather. You know, the boxer. I just looked him up. He's here for some charity events. I think this is a huge misunderstanding." Turner scoffed loudly, dismissing Daniels with a wave of his hand. "Mayweather? Are you kidding me? That guy's probably off in some mansion somewhere. You think he'd come to a place like this?" Daniels nodded. He does that kind of stuff, sir. He goes to small towns, supports local charities, works with kids. It's all over the news." Turner rolled his eyes, laughing harshly. "Oh, please. He's nobody. Just another punk trying to act tough. Don't be so gullible, Daniels." Daniels didn't argue, but the seed of doubt had been planted. As Turner stomped back to his desk, Daniels couldn't help but glance toward the holding room, where Floyd sat calmly, waiting. Something told him this situation was far from over, and that Turner was about to regret everything. The atmosphere in the station shifted dramatically when the front doors swung open. Two high-profile individuals strode in, a local business leader and a well-known journalist. Both carried an air of authority that immediately caught the attention of everyone in the room. Officer Daniels, already uneasy after realizing Floyd's true identity, straightened up at the sight of them. Officer Turner, on the other hand, barely looked up from his desk. "We're here to see Floyd Mayweather," the business leader announced, his voice firm and commanding. Turner's head shot up, his brow furrowed in confusion as he slowly rose from his chair. "Mayweather," he echoed, trying to process what he had just heard. "What are you talking about?" The journalist, an older woman with a sharp gaze, stepped forward. "Yes, Floyd Mayweather, the undefeated boxing champion, philanthropist, and global icon. We've been following his tour, and we received word that he was brought here. Where is he?" The room fell silent. A couple of officers exchanged wide-eyed glances. Daniel's throat tightened as he stole a nervous glance at Turner, whose face had turned a shade paler. Turner stammered, his usual bluster faltering. "He's in the holding room, but..." Before he could finish, the journalist brushed past him, making a beeline for the holding room. Turner scrambled after her, his confidence visibly crumbling. The business leader followed closely, their presence a stark contrast to Turner's rattled demeanor. When the journalist reached the holding room, she stopped in her tracks. Her face softened into a warm smile. "Mr. Mayweather," she greeted, her voice laced with concern. "Are you all right?" Floyd looked up from where he sat, his calm composure unchanged. "I'm fine, thank you," he said with a slight nod. The officers watching from the doorway froze. Turner, standing at the back, looked like he'd been struck. The realization hit him like a freight train. The man he had just assaulted and arrested was Floyd Mayweather, one of the most famous athletes in the world. "I didn't know who you were," Turner stammered, stepping forward in a desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "If I had known." Floyd cut him off, his tone calm but firm. "It shouldn't matter who I am. Would you have treated anyone else differently?" The question hung in the air like a heavy weight. Turner's mouth opened, but no words came out. He had no answer. Floyd stood, his quiet strength filling the room. "I'm here on a charity tour," he said, addressing the journalist and business leader. "I came to this town to visit a youth center and promote nonviolence and education. Instead, I was profiled, assaulted, and treated like a criminal." The journalist's eyes flashed with outrage. She pulled out her phone and began recording. "Mr. Mayweather, do you mind if I document this? The public needs to know what happened here." "Go ahead," Floyd said, his gaze steady on Turner. The officer squirmed under the weight of his stare. As the journalist recorded, Floyd calmly recounted the events of the night, detailing how Turner had ignored his ID, fabricated accusations, and struck him with a baton without provocation. The business leader shook his head in disbelief, his expression a mix of anger and disappointment. Turner's once commanding presence had completely evaporated. He stood frozen, his hands twitching nervously. The other officers watched in stunned silence, some already stepping back to distance themselves from the unfolding disaster. The power dynamic in the room had shifted entirely. Turner, who had reveled in his authority just hours earlier, now stood exposed and powerless. And Floyd, the man Turner had underestimated, remained unshaken, a picture of grace and strength in the face of injustice. Within hours, the incident at the station became the talk of the town. And soon, the nation. The journalist's footage of Floyd Mayweather sitting calmly in the holding room, juxtaposed with Officer Turner's aggressive behavior, went viral. News outlets picked up the story, and social media exploded with outrage. The hashtag Justice for Mayweather began trending worldwide, drawing attention not just to Floyd's experience, but to the broader issue of racial profiling and police misconduct. By morning, Turner's career was in freefall. The police department, under immense public pressure, placed him on immediate administrative leave while launching an internal investigation. As more reporters descended on the small town, details about Turner's history of complaints for excessive force and discriminatory practices resurfaced. What had been swept under the rug for years was now under a glaring spotlight. Back at the station, as Floyd prepared to leave, Turner stood off to the side, pale and visibly shaken. His arrogance from the previous night had been replaced with the hollow look of a man realizing he was trapped in a situation of his own making. Floyd walked toward him, his expression calm yet resolute. "You thought hitting me would make you stronger," Floyd said, his voice steady but cutting. "But real strength isn't about fear. It's about respect. I hope you learn that before it's too late." Turner opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He simply watched, helpless, as Floyd turned and walked toward the exit. The door opened to reveal a crowd of supporters, reporters, and cameras waiting for him outside. Turner's view of the scene was obscured by the flood of light from camera flashes, but he could hear the cheers of the crowd. The fallout was swift and far-reaching. The video and story sparked national outrage, prompting renewed conversations about racial profiling, abuse of power, and police reform. Protests erupted across the country, demanding accountability and justice, not just for Floyd but for all those who had been victims of similar treatment. Meanwhile, Floyd used the platform to amplify his voice. Instead of seeking personal revenge, he focused on change. "This isn't about me," he told reporters during a press conference. "It's about creating a system where no one else has to go through what I did. This is about respect, equality, and justice." Floyd doubled down on his efforts to support youth programs, particularly those aimed at underserved communities. He poured resources into his nonviolence initiative, ensuring that children across the country had access to education, mentorship, and opportunities to thrive. The incident, while painful, became a turning point that fueled his mission to create a better future. Turner, disgraced and ostracized, was forced to confront his actions. The investigation into his conduct revealed years of unchecked abuse, leading to his permanent dismissal from the force. The department itself underwent sweeping reforms, including mandatory anti-bias training and the implementation of body cameras for all officers. Turner's name became synonymous with the consequences of unchecked power, a cautionary tale for others who might follow in his footsteps. A week later, Floyd returned to the youth center he had initially planned to visit. As he stepped inside, the room erupted into cheers. The kids, who had been following the news, crowded around him, their faces beaming with admiration. One boy, no older than 10, tugged at Floyd's sleeve. "Were you scared?" he asked, his voice filled with curiosity. Floyd knelt to the boy's level and smiled. "It's not about being scared," he said gently. "It's about staying strong and standing up for what's right, even when it's hard." The boy nodded, his eyes wide with understanding. Floyd stood and led the kids to the gym, where he began a boxing demonstration. As he taught them the importance of discipline, respect, and resilience, the camera panned out, capturing the scene of hope and determination. In that moment, Floyd was more than a champion fighter. He was a symbol of perseverance and justice, proof that strength wasn't about brute force, but about using power to uplift others and create change. The crowd watching knew they were witnessing something extraordinary, the triumph of dignity over prejudice, and the enduring spirit of a man who refused to be broken.